If you've got big dreams and bad genes, you are in the right place. Bromley shirts are available at barbellapparel.com. Link is in the description. I'm really interested, given that, and it's weird to call your deadlift mid. I mean, you just
Yeah,
doubled an
it is.
880 deadlift, but that's where we're
Mhm.
at now, right? So,
Yeah.
given that disparity, and like that's the thing that you have to focus on in order to be the guy to beat, and that works so hard against your leverages and the way you're built.
Mhm.
What specific tactics are you employing to try to get that on the fast track, or is it just something where you're just letting everything grow at its rate and stay in the course?
So I mentioned that squat deadlift progression that we've been doing. Um, we found systemically what works, right? Like I know that if I need to have my deadlift at a all-time high 12 weeks from now, I understand how to do that, at least systemically, right? Um, but given, I just don't have great leverages, I have to be absolutely perfect technically. And I'm still not even close to there yet. Like I could still pick apart a few things, but it's like, okay, I know that my legs are my strong suit. I found a way to make my deadlift a little squattier. My torso is really long. I had to focus on things like seated good mornings for like 18 months so that my mid back would not fold over when it gets heavy because my that lever is just long. I pause all of my rows. Like I train. My back has to be so much better than somebody else at holding positions because it's 6 inches longer. Like when I sit on an airplane, I'm the tallest person sitting down. I'm
Yeah.
barely 6 foot tall, right? So it's just like being really intentional about the back being so bulletproof to like not necessarily move weight, but to stay in position. And then finding a way to get my legs more involved in the deadlift. And I'm also a very avid advocate of like, okay, people will ramp their eighth rep and they'll be able to get it when they have no energy at all. That just tells me that ramping is more efficient because you can do it when when you have nothing left. So like in contests, I ramp from rep one, whether I need to or not. And I know that's not for everybody, but we got to play games with the deadlift because I gotta find points. And I think I've scored like I score points in deadlift where I shouldn't. I mean, I beat like Arnold UK. I pulled a rep more than Bobby. Yeah, he was kind of sick and hurting. His max is at that time 100 plus pounds more than mine. I pulled one more rep than him at 770 because we ramp from rep one and play games and like figure out how to get everything out of the pull. So I just have to I got to play chess with the deadlift. And it's like, the final piece I'll say, I've been rambling a lot, is finding that max recoverable volume in certain lifts. I can't do a ton of direct back work or hip hinging work because my torso's 5 feet long, but I can do unlimited amounts of leg volume, right? The inverse is true with people who have super long legs and short torso. You give them tons of volume on squats. Guess what, coach? They're just using their back. Whether the squat looks good or not, their back is what's getting worked. Their legs aren't. They need single leg work. They need leg press. They need belt squat. They need stuff like that. It just tailoring the program to the leverages and what actually really produces stimulus.
That I mean, all of that feels like I'm having a lot of my early years kind of repeated back to me. I mean, I have, my friends would make like humpback jokes or like, Quasimodo jokes because I have such a fat round of meat right on my mid back because from the time I was a teenager, before I knew any better, I mean, every deadlift was just mid back folded. And then it kind of became where it's like, you can't even label it as a deadlift stimulus because it's so like wormy and different than what it was before. And again, if you don't have a system in place that actually accounts for what is recoverable, what's a good enough stimulus rather than the greatest stimulus you could experience right now, you end up shooting yourself in the foot. Every time I would go to pull, I thought, oh, this has to be a hard, heavy pull. It has to be more than last time. And then eventually it's like the thing that's hanging on by a thread, which is everything that supports your torso, is the first thing to go. And it's like, it makes you want to blow your brains out. And then you add in Strongman, which is like, that's the only thing you're being graded on.
Yeah.
And then, oh, by the way, you got to go stone load and do bag picks and do log cleans on top of that. I mean, I struggled for a lot of years getting around that. But I think a lot of this really does start to make more comprehensive sense when people get away from the idea that a training session needs to be something that is at your limit or that is by definition more than you've ever done before in order for it to be productive, because
Hmm.
you can find your limit and work below that and get enough work in where it's a good stimulus, but you also reinforce good habits. But that's so counter to, I think, how so many people view training. So when you're, I get the sense that you use the deadlift or very, very close deadlift variations as kind of the main driver of that. You're not going crazy with specialty bars and different banded setups or different positions. I mean, how do you tend to kind of arrange your main work that's focused on that pattern versus all the supplementary stuff that's supposed to kind of come in from
Hmm.
behind?
So like further for the show, yes, we'll deadlift. But it's a lot of positional stuff. So like pause deadlifts, like we're not reinventing the wheel there because I just have to get my back able to hold positions. But like further from the show, we like things. The seated good morning has just been a staple in my our system forever. I'm not good at a real good morning. I don't. It's not a good movement for me. But a seated SSB good morning done in the way that we like to do it. A axle stiff leg deadlift. Um, Recently we had some conversations with JF Carone, and he really loved controlled eccentrics on deadlifts. So closer into the off season, we've been playing with controlled eccentrics. So just more time under tension, which is
Like
something we've really never played with in the deadlift.
like
I
how
really haven't
heavy?
done it. Um, I mean, most of it like kind of off season percentages. So like, I think the heaviest we got was 70%. But he would do it on really heavy pulls, and that's just something we haven't played with yet. And then in a peak, um, I know a lot of people don't like to. It's just like a huge divide. Do we compartmentalize our deadlift? Like if we suck at the top, do we rack pull or do we deficit? Right? We're a rack pull camp. Like I think rack pulling totally helps, especially being a guy who ramps intentionally. I can set up my exact ramping pattern on the. I do the old school like belt squat rack pulls that like Shaw used to do. We'll do those during the peaking protocol. So we finish our main meat and potatoes deadlifts. We'll do a little more volume from elevated so I can get my torso angle high enough that I can recover from it. But now it has reached the point. I think I spent so many years sucking off the floor that my off the floor has gotten good enough. And now I'll fail at lockout. So now we've shifted to let's do this top end work. And I don't know. We've done it we did it for UK. We did it for Strongest Man on Earth. And now we've done it a bit. We've pulled back in these last few weeks for the Arnold. We're not doing the rack pulls anymore just because I can't recover from it. And my deadlift is so much higher than what it was. Like I think at Arnold UK, I could have pulled 850, 860. I am not afraid of a 950 pull in 3 weeks,
Wow.
right? Like, so we've found what works for me. Like that's not gospel, but I think we're on a good track with it.
I ever find yourself confused by the complexity of programming? I know I struggled like crazy in my early strongman career. There was just too much advice, and every decision I made felt like a guess. As soon as I hit a snag in any program, I would have no idea what to do, so I would inevitably bail. It took me years of training and coaching to figure out how to predictably increase muscle and strength, both in myself and others. And those lessons took me to my own showings in World's Strongest Man, America's Strongest Man, and the Arnold in the 231-pound weight class. This is why we made Base Strength AI, to give clear, direct, and personalized instruction right in the middle of your workout in real time. Base Strength AI features 3 programs: Block, 70s Powerlifter, and Bullmastiff, each one inspired by the work ethic and programming of the biggest and strongest bodybuilders, powerlifters, and strongmen throughout history. These templates originated in my book Base Strength, and they can be ran as is, but with Base Strength AI, weight and volume are prescribed to you on your specific feedback, and that's personalization that even an online coach can't replicate. This gives you the absolute certainty that every rep is meaningful, that every block of training is getting you closer to your goals. It's my programming, but it's your program. Get the heart of old school training with the intelligence of a coach right in your back pocket. Head now to basestrength.com. I always run into this type of paradoxical thinking when I'm trying to arrange my work the same way. Like, what is going to be more recoverable so I can get stimulus without falling apart for the next workout? And the rationale goes very similarly. It's like, well, if I can stay a bit more upright, that's going to take away or lessen the impact of the thing that I'm fighting against that's like holding me back. So it's like, okay, maybe a trap bar, or maybe an elevated pull, or maybe even like kind of a modified like frog stance or something where I'm a little more upright. But then it feels like it very quickly turns where it's like, okay, but now the load's higher. So it's like, okay, is the better position allowing you to recover, or is the extra load, knocking your dick limp?
Hmm.
And I find that it's like I don't know until I do it, but
Yeah.
it's, you know what I mean. And it's like this for us, or it's like maybe at the start it was better, but then I got good at it, and it's like, okay, this is back
Hmm.
in that's going to blow my WOD camp. So it seems like you're finding things that work and recycling it, which is like I think the
Yeah.
best thing that anybody can do.
Hmm.
But do you find that you do you have room to like experiment with new things, or
Hmm.
are you just like very loyal to it worked
Well,
last time, so let's run it again?
so I have the luxury of time off because I only competed 4 times last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and even then, it didn't feel like I had time off because we finish one show and we're 12 weeks from the next one. We should start laying the groundwork. But what's great about Strongman is because yes, I've peaked for deadlift 8 times with a similar system. I've had 8 different deadlift formats and shows. So whether that's Arnold Amateur was Ukrainian deadlift for reps, I've had deadlift for max, I've had deadlift for reps elevated, I've had all kinds of different things. So towards the end of that peak, it shoots off and we go a little bit different. And what's kind of been nice is having this variety of deadlifts has kind of forced Alec to have wheels turning with this specific end goal with this show, plus what was wrong with the last time. We kind of have just gotten to experiment. So it's kind of cool in this like 7 podium streak. We've had 7 different kinds of deadlifts. We've gotten to experiment 7 different ways. So we've actually with this specific progression of squat deadlifts, we have this base and we have like 6 offshoots off of it that we know 4.5 of them work, right? And it's just I think having some long-term plan and relationship with the coach, like there's no replacement for it because nobody aside from like Thor and Sebastian have that much data. Like I bet they could give a pretty similar answer to what I just said, but like what coach and athlete have been together long enough to actually say that? Nobody, right? Um, I mean, there might be somebody that I'm not thinking of, but it might be just Thor and Sebastian. But me and Alec, 3.5 years of believing in a system and just tweaking, like it's pretty adaptable.
And the moral of that story to anybody listening is how absolutely important it is to take notes, make meaningful conclusions about the things you recognize in your training. And when you tweak, the tweak should be purposeful, not just like, hey, let's go try this other thing over here. I want one more deadlift thing and then we'll move on because I'm beating the deadlift thing
Okay.
into the ground very selfishly because I want to pull as much out of this as possible. You mentioned that you were weak off the floor. And obviously your legs are very strong. Was that in particular in was that due in particularly to the difficulty you had either through your erectors or midsection or upper back in maintaining position? So it wasn't necessarily driving power; it was more supportive power.
So I think over the years I've conceptually rebuilt my deadlift like 2 or 3 different times. I don't think I like if you would have asked me 2 years ago, how do you pull slack off the floor? How do you create tension? How do you do all that stuff? I was more of I'm trying to be a traditional hip hinging deadlift. And it just was not how I'm built. And then once I figured out, okay, I need to be a little bit of a squattier deadlift, it was also in the same period of time where I got pretty fat and I ruined, you know, my belly's in the way of my knees. So I had to do kind of like a thin feet, wide knees, which, has its a time and a place. But, Dan Bell's not setting world records like that. It's not the best way to pull, right? So it's just an evolution of styles and leverages over time. And then really once we kind of crack that code of like the issue is the back can't hold positions. Now that we know we need to do a squattier style deadlift, once we laser focused on that one issue, I'm no longer weak off the floor, right? If the back can hold positions, I'm not weak off the floor. I think I could pull close to 1,000 to my knees at this point. I think I'm
Wow.
pretty confident in my pull off the floor. At Shaw, I failed 930 at 99% of lockout, um, the lockout pattern is where I'll fail at this point. And it's just because by design, if you just looked at my leverages, I should be, weaker off the floor. We laser focused on it for 18 months to 2 years. Now that's the strong point. Now we got to laser focus somewhere else. And I bet at some point the off the floor is going to be the weak point again. So it's just, you know, evolving with
Yeah.
where you're weak and where you're strong. And it's so crazy to think that I might pull, 930 to 950 in a couple weeks, and that's weak.